Well, hey there, YouTube. It's PD Two Finger, and today it's going to be a longer, chatty video. I am going to be talking about amplifiers. Specifically, I'm building a battery-powered guitar amp, and I built a couple of bass amps, battery-powered bass amps. And I'm going to talk about those briefly. I want to give a preface to this in case newer viewers have stumbled across this, because a video like battery powered guitar amp, I might get a couple of new people wanting to see what's going on. So, first off, your guitar tone today hopefully is going to be different than, and excuse me, my cat just woke up and it's treat time for Kita. There you go, buddy. So we evolve. Every year your guitar tone should change. And it seems this way to me, Maybe you'll find something magical and stick with that for a while. I remember for a long time, my guitar tone was terrible. It was a big muff with a mid-scoop EQ and a Dodd FX56, FX52 maybe. It was a bass chorus, and I would turn the rate knob all the way down and it would stop. So it would just give you this very, very, very short delay, like 30 millisecond or something. It was almost like when you were a kid, if you took a paper towel tube and sang through that or spoke through it, it would give you this timbrality, this like, it's almost too short to be considered an echo because it's such a tight delay. But I love that sound, and boy, I don't love it anymore. I did go through a phase of higher gain stuff, of course, and then I started writing in a different timbrality for the guitar, which was like just a slight overdrive and a tremolo and a spring reverb. And this has harkened me into getting into more like surf rock type tones. It didn't start out with that, I have to be a stoner doom guy and grow a beard and get offset guitars. I just wrote these songs, and they were not surf rock, they were not stoner doom. That was what I got into. And my point is, these amps that I'm building, they're not tube tone monsters. They are actually powered speakers because I'm using modelers to get my guitar tones. So if you're one of these people that hears modeler and that's gonna infuriate you, first off, let me defend myself by saying we live in an apartment. So if it wasn't for the advances in modeling technology, we wouldn't have been able to do what we did, which is a lot. We've done a lot, and I've written over 500 pieces of music in my life. And that's not some number that I pulled out of my hat. I have a huge collection of recordings because I started recording in 1996 and I still continue to do so. So whether it's the family band or the duo or my solo stuff, where I'm unlimited, I find myself changing up my guitar tone quite a bit. So the amp I'm building today is much more of a powered speaker. There'll be an option to run it with a tweeter if you'd like, or run just the stock speaker. So if that's something that is immediately going to be a deal breaker for you, well, that's who I am. We live in an apartment. I have tube gear. I honestly do. I have tube amps, and I have tube preamp stuff and some older tube stereo stuff that I've converted. So I'm no stranger to it, and I do use it occasionally. Like if I play it, if I played with the family band, I used to always get this Philharmonic tube amp that has a tremolo and a tone control. It's like a 3-knob amp, rate, tone, and volume. And man, it had a Jensen Alnico speaker in it, and it did have that tube thing in spades. But as I moved on, we were living in an apartment where we just subjected the people to the noise, and we had our door frame kicked in. One of the neighbors flipped out and kicked the door in on us. And since then, we built a 600 watt PA that runs on lithium ion batteries, quite a few of them. And we load up the Toyota and we head out to remote locations and make music remote in the wild. So you can check that out. We have these remote jams, they're called, and there's quite a few of those up on this channel. I'm not making it up. There's rig rundowns just about from every year, or when we do a significant upgrade, I'll do a rig. And I need to do another one of those, but you can check all that stuff out, and it's lots of fun. But this particular, what you're looking at here, is part of our micro and macro rigs. We have 3 different rigs to choose from when we go outdoors to make music. We have the full giant 600 watt El Grande for a regular remote jam. Then we have a micro remote rig, which is much smaller stuff that we can, if the weather's nice and we want to play on our patio and have the cops come and shut us down at 5 p.m., even though we're playing through the equivalent of small bookshelf speakers, we'll do that. Or we can go to the park. Typically, we're not hassled at the park. But getting a decent bass sound is always a challenge, so this is where the micro macro rigs come in. We have this 10-inch, it's a 100 watt Class D power amp with a 3-band DQ, which is a circuit that you buy on eBay for like $10. And they sell it for active bass, for like an active EQ to install on your bass. You can install it in the amp and it'll work just as fine. So this runs on 15 18650 cells. There's 2 of them to power the EQ, maybe 3, and then the other 6 and 6. 6 equals like 24 volts, and then there's another 6 to double capacity to power the 100 watt Class D power amp. Yes, I said Class D. That's what we use. We wouldn't be able to do it any other way, because Class D is the only amplifier efficient enough to run off batteries for some period of time. So it is what it is. The older Class D amps, people said that they sound harsh. This stuff, I think it sounds fantastic. I have no complaint. I play my modelers through it. The sound is fantastic. If you listen to our remote jams, you'll hear what I'm talking about. And there really is no other way to do it. So getting into the your tube amp would sound better argument, of course it would. And I'm not saying that it wouldn't. I'm saying there's no AC outlet on a tree. So we put that argument to bed and move on. Here is the amplifier. Master volume, which is on the amplifier. Level is on the preamp. There is a gain or a distortion knob, and then a mix, and then a bass, treble, and presence. So the circuit, basically what's inside of here is a, excuse me, I'm going to put my space heater on. You might hear a little, but my feet are freezing cold. So inside of this thing, there's a buffer to keep the signal clean if you're plugging directly into it. And it's a Sans amp circuit that I built off of a PCB. So that's the preamp, and then the 100 watt Class D amp board. And this one has the same thing. There's like 12 volt 3 by 18650 battery pack to run the LED, the buffer, and the preamp, and then the 24 volt pack, which is 6 by 2 18650s, doubled up to double the capacity, powers the TPA 3116D2 mono Class D amplifier board. Now here is this has a partner. You can run this. This is I call it a preamp. I could call it a multi-effect, but I don't. I try to be honest with myself. You know what I mean? I could build a 555 square wave oscillator and say I built a synth and call it my synth. I could get a Macintosh. I had one, but I didn't. I never called it my Mac. Never. It was a 27-inch 2009 late dual-core iMac, and I hated that thing. I gave it away. So couldn't get it out of the house quick enough. So here is this bypasses the Electro Harmonix baseball. And then the Demeter compilator, dark glass BK7, I believe it is. It's got a mix, volume, gain, and a couple of three-way switches for options on the distortion. And then Baxendall with a master volume, so it's bass and treble. Now, each one of these slots, like basically, here's the EQ, here's the master volume for the preamp, here's the distortion area, here's the compressor area, and here's the auto wah area. There's also a buffer back here. And this runs off a 12.5 volt 18650 pack that lives inside of it. 18650 is a lithium ion battery. And that's what's inside of a Tesla. And we recycle those from old laptop power packs that we buy at the Goodwill. Everything that we get is recycled. This is a cable TV box that someone gave me. This came from a blown PV Basic 50. This I cut it down and painted it. And so this preamp, every one of the circuits with the exception of the EA baseball. Every one of the circuits had multiple circuits in there. I tried all kinds. I tried every simple compressor that's on, and none of them were even close to doing anything that I could hear for a bass guitar. Also, the buffer I had, the JFET buffer was distorting because the bass signal is just too big for that. That's something that they won't tell you at the forum. You got to build a TLO71 buffer. Has much bigger bandwidth or headroom if you run on, especially on 12.5 volts as opposed to 9. But yeah, there was like 5 compressors at least before we tried the Demeter compilator, and quite a few distortions, a bunch of different EQs. So this was kind of a challenge, and it's a good sounding little box. You know, it's nice to pair it up with this, but you don't really need it because this has built-in distortion. But it's nice to have the auto wah, it's nice to have the compressor, and this is a really nice distortion circuit. So you can use it if you want. Hey, you don't have to use it. But we're talking about making the amp. I'm sorry to digress. That I guess we still haven't moved on. I forgot these pictures were in here. Here's the buffer that's encased in hot glue. Here's the power amp PCB. Here's the. See, some of this stuff isn't hooked up. And here's the preamp, little wooden holder for it that you can pop this in and out. I use rare earth magnets to secure this, so you don't have to unscrew it. And these are for the battery pack, so you unplug these and then you can replace the batteries. And they live on the inside of this box. So the circuitry, this is the roof. This is the roof here. The circuitry's on the roof. And the speaker out cannot be grounded. And I realized, hey, dummy, when I built it, I had grounded it. So I had to cut this all out, hack it all out, and then put a plastic panel in. But yeah, it's double fused because there's 24 volts and 12 volts input and output. And here's the power connections. And I really like that. We had to like mark these with marker to get the polarity of the magnets correct. So here's the 12 volt pack, and then you have 6 and 6. Wired kind of goofy, and these wires come up. And these old boards came out of an old tube amp, some old thing that I bought that ended up, I would have killed myself if I kept playing with it. 400 volts straight to the heart. I got a couple extra fuses just in case. So yeah, this was a fun project. Now today, someone had gifted me this crate amp, and today this is what I started working on. This is going to be battery pack in the bottom, and then up here there's going to be a runoff groove tonemender, which is a 3-band EQ with a shift for the high end. So there's a toggle that shifts the high end, and you can set it up to sound like a Vox, you can set it up to sound like a Fender, you can set it up to sound like a Marshall. So it'll have a input, an LED for the 12 volt side, a master power switch, and an LED for the power amp side, because there's going to be a 24 volt pack and a 12 volt pack. 12 volt pack is going to run, there's going to be no buffer in this amp. I probably will end up putting a buffer in it. You know that? I shouldn't say that. But yeah, there's going to have a input. When you unplug your guitar, it will shut off the 12 volt pack. Then the master power switch is going to turn on the power amp. And then there'll be a master volume here, treble, mid-range, bass, and then master volume or gain knob for the preamp, and then a single input. So that's the plan. This tape here holds this wire. There's a real long wire in here, so I'm going to have to redo that. The baffle is good. So I got to remove that tape and shorten up this, just get rid of this. I think this is like some vacuum cleaner. If you ever see a vacuum cleaner by the dumpster and you have a snips handy, you cut that wire off. Makes for a nice speaker cable. So yeah, this speaker had some damage on it. Somebody hit it with a screwdriver. Wasn't me, and I ended up gluing it with a piece of paper. I guess you're supposed to use tissue paper when you glue that, like toilet tissue. But this board here is going to have to go. I'm going to have to try to gracefully probably cut that out with a jigsaw or something. I don't know, but I need to be able to put a battery tray in here. So that's going to get messy. I probably going to want to remove the speaker before I do any work on this. But building an amp, it tends to be a more involved process. Like today I took the chassis apart and sanded all the paint off the front. And in order for me, like there's a real nice power switch that I want to use. It's only a single SPST. I really need a DPDT for how I like to do it, running two different the alternative would be to run a 24 volt pack and then put a voltage, a step down transformer, a buck in it. So I might just do that. Make it simpler, I might do that. But here's where the LED is going to go, master volume. I have a plate that I am JB welding right now that's going to be JB welded over this hole, and then I'll I'll JB weld it in the back, and then I'll put JB weld in the front, and then sand it down, and then spray this. So basically any unnecessary holes are going to get covered up before I go any further. And that's what I'm working on today. That's what these, like there's a panel in here and there's a little panel in here. This panel is like this brass piece that had a hole in it. They had to enlarge, but I'm going to put the toggle switch for the tone shift is going to go here. And this is just a blank panel. And the panels that I'm using are little rectangles. They're about this size. They're a little longer. They're actually longer than the chassis is. Like if you set it here, it would come up to about here. And they're from a transformer. I disassembled an AC transformer, and they're little pieces of steel that, like little plates, like little sheet metal strips. And that's what's inside of the transformer. So I disassembled the transformer and kept those. I had a ton of them, and I only kept a small amount, like an idiot. And now I'm finding they're perfect for this job. So you know what? I'll probably take apart some other transformer if I need more. Now I use that JB Weld automotive epoxy, and this lamp here, it's sitting in here to heat this chassis up, and that helps for your JB Weld to dry really well. You put a lamp on it, it heats up the metal, and then it dries better. So in this picture are some tools that I used today. The files, the sanding blocks, the gloves, the JB Weld. This is what I use for the JB Weld. I use a toothpick to mix it, and then I scrape it up to make sure I use all of it. Try not to be wasteful, and you got to really clean these. Be careful how you dispense it and clean them up. You don't want to get JB Weld all over the nozzle. Don't be a goof like Petey. And then these are clamps. They're clamping together. I put two of those pieces, one like this and one next to it, and then I cut a couple in half to glue this way. So I'm gluing that panel, and that's what's going to go in that larger rectangular spot. When this is dryish, after 2 hours, when this video's done, I'm going to unclamp this and then take that and clamp it onto the inside, make another batch, and whip it up. Now, I got out this jack and this pot to double check my holes, my existing holes. Were they large enough, or did I need to drill them out? Because they had some weird plastic shaft pots, and it turned out everything was fine. Everything was just the right size. So here you can see there's this hole here. I cut this, like this piece in here was like brassish looking, and it had a hole, and that hole will be where I put the switch for the mid shift, the frequency shift. But what was here was a big rectangular hole for a rectangular switch that mounted on the PCB. So that's a problem. There's two of those rectangular holes. One I filled with that piece. The other's going to get filled with the piece that I'm making, the double wide. And then with these ears sticking out here, they cut into where the pot has to sit. So I used tin snips to cut the edges off of both of these. So it kind of looks like a house, the shape of this block. And that's going to just give me some room for the pot to mount over here. I think this next pothole is covered. So when these are dryish, I will make another batch of JV Weld and level this off, fill it up. And then when that dries, I'll sand it down nice and then spray this primer and then spray it black. So there's like, I hate to say body shop skills, but I worked in a body shop for about a year. And it was a horrible, horrible job. Really not a good job. Like, that's a job, like, if you're going to do that, you might as well just be a regular mechanic rather than a body shop guy. But the body shop guys were all like, something was wrong with all of them. Like, one guy was like kind of a creepy like molester. Another guy was like, he was breaking into houses. I think he had a drug habit. And then like all the rest of the guys were either like they had real bad personality disorders or they were alcoholics. Like, everybody that worked in the body shop was like, that was the final stop before the owner of the company would just fire you, was body shop. So if you were a hopeless case, he would demote you. He would point in the area of the building where the body, and he would go, body shop. This German guy that I worked for. And I got banished to the body shop a couple times. The owner was a guy named Ben. He was an African-American guy who was real racist, and he hated white people. So he was really, really hard on me, that guy. Really, really unbelievably sadistic guy to work for. So, yeah, here's what it looks like. I sanded it up. It needs to be, I'm going to prime it, and I probably will take this down with some finer sandpaper because you can see how rough I was on it. But it was all bent up, so it was hard to get the paint off. And I wanted to try to get all the paint off of it. So it kind of blew out. I'm not really in that good a shape to be sanding this in one shot. Now here's a bag with the parts in it. Here you can see that rectangular switch. I saved all the hardware and parts when I disassembled the amp, so I'll be able to reuse some of that stuff in the build. And that's it. That's all I got done for today. Thank you for joining me for making the amp step 1. Hopefully I'll have it in me. This may be the last video for the series. I really don't like taking time out of my day to document this stuff because I already really know this procedure really well. I've done it a lot, and I tend to not document it. But hey, if it's interesting to you and you get a kick out of it, leave me a comment. And maybe I'll make another one. If I don't get any comments, this is going to be the last one. That's how we're going to do it. You're going to have to earn it because I really don't want to waste my time with videos that people do not enjoy. So, try to stay warm or stay cool. If that's where you live, you're lucky. It's freezing cold here in Chicago. Hug your pets and peace.